In the quiet forests of the Czech Republic, far from villages and trade roads, stands a castle that has puzzled people for centuries. This is the Houska Castle. Unlike other castles, it was not built to guard a border, watch over a river, or protect farmland, or really do much of anything. Instead, it was built over something hidden deep in the ground. Beneath its chapel, there is said to be a pit so deep that no one could ever find the bottom. For centuries, people whispered about if it was just a hole in the earth, or maybe just a gateway to hell. Old stories claim that strange creatures once came from this opening that frightened the people who lived nearby. To them, this was not only a mystery of nature, it was something dark, something that they could not explain. So a castle was raised on top of this pit, as one does. Because if you want to cover up a hole, you may as well really cover up a hole. Its stone walls did not look outward like most castles do. To this day, Houska Castle is remembered not only as a fortress of stone, but as a place of fear and legend. Today, believe it or not, we are also going to talk about the Houska Castle and the secrets it has guarded for centuries. The story of Houska Castle began long before stone walls rose above the forest. It begins in the late 800s with a ruler named Prince Slavomir. Absolute hell of a name. Slavomir chose a hilltop deep in the woods to build a wooden fort. He imagined it might be one day a safe home for his son. But from the very beginning, this choice seemed a bit strange. The land was far from villages. The ground around it was actually fairly swampy and wet, and no roads ended up leading to it. It was quiet, a little too quiet some would claim, almost as if the place did not want to be lived in. As workers cleared the ground, they noticed signs of earlier people. Broken pottery and fire pits suggested that Slavic and Celtic tribes had once passed through the area. But they had never really stayed. Perhaps they already knew what was hidden here. During construction, something happened that no one would end up expecting. The limestone cliff beneath the fort would split open, revealing a dark hole. When the workers dropped stones inside, the men leaned forward to listen, where no echo came back. No sound of rock against rock. The stones seemed to just vanish into nothing. From here, the imagination just completely runs wild and fear began to spread. Villagers whispered that the pit actually had no bottom and it was a gateway to hell itself. This is very typical for humanity to do. Just remember, the human brain in the absence of information will fill in information, which makes it 1,000 times worse. So basically, if you ever think something bad when you actually don't know, just know it's your brain screwing with you. So not long after, stories of strange creatures would begin to crop up. Shadows with bat-like wings were said to fly out at night. Farmers spoke of a terrible shape crawling from the hole, something part frog, part dog, part human. Frog Dog Man. Life on the hill became rather dangerous. Cows and goats would fall sick, crops withered before harvest, and at night, animals were dragged away by unseen wings. Families who lived nearby also just ended up packing up and leaving. The fort was never finished. Slavomir's family never moved in, and then the hill was abandoned. Centuries would pass. The wooden fort of Prince Slavomir had long crumbled away, but the hill and the dark hole within it had not been forgotten. By the late 1200s, a new ruler, Ottokar II of Bohemia, decided to build again on this strange land. This time, it would not be a wooden fort, it would be a stone castle, strong and lasting. But before the first stones were laid, the pit beneath the hill became once more the center of attention. The old legends had not faded. People still whispered of voices, shadows, and creatures rising from these depths, and it was fairly concerning. Ottokar's men were curious. They wanted to know what lay inside. Once again, they would turn to prisoners, which isn't that how it always goes? Prisoners were promised freedom if they agreed to be lowered into the hidey hole. The first man was young and strong, and when he went down, he would be actually pulled back up only moments later, and he was no longer the same. His hair had allegedly turned white. His face looked decades older. He babbled about darkness and foul smells, as well as voices screaming in the deep, voices that were not his own. Within 2 days, he actually died, leaving behind only fear and whispers of what he had seen below. Others were lowered in after him because apparently people who saw that were like, that's not going to happen to me. And they too returned broken. Some aged, some went completely insane. One prisoner begged never to be sent down again, saying what waited below was worse than any punishment on earth. The pit was too dangerous to leave open, so the builders tried something new at this point. They covered it with heavy stone slabs, sealing the darkness below. And on top of those stones, they built the castle's most sacred space, a chapel. The chapel walls were decorated with holy images. One showed Archangel Michael, his spear piercing a demon on the ground. But there were stranger images too. On one wall, a figure appeared, a half woman, half animal. She held a bow in her hands, pulling the string back with her left hand, which in those times was seen as a mark of evil. It was as if the builders hoped that by placing the holy above the unholy, they could keep the darkness trapped. The castle itself seemed less like a home or fortress and more like a prison, built not to protect people from the enemy outside, but to keep something inside from ever escaping. With Houska Castle finished, it did not look like any of the other castles of this time. At first glance, its high walls and stone towers seemed strong, but the details were going to reveal something a bit strange, something that was actually fairly unsettling because do you know how much work it takes to build a castle? A lot. Most castles were built with purpose. They had tall battlements to fight off enemies, wide windows for watching the land, and easy access to water and food. But Houska had almost none of these things. There were no kitchens inside, no nearby water sources to draw from. The castle was built far from all trade routes, villages, and even farmland. It stood in a lonely, swampy forest far away from anything useful. Even stranger were the walls themselves. Instead of facing outward, ready to stop attackers from coming in, Houska's defenses seemed to face inward, as if guarding the inside from something that was already trapped there. And then there were the windows. Some rooms just had none at all, leaving them dark and airless. Others had windows that opened only to the castle courtyard, never to the world beyond. All of these choices made the castle almost useless as a fortress or even a home. But if its purpose was not to protect people from outside enemies, then what was it really for? The answer, many believe, is fairly simple. Houska was not built to keep things out, it was built to keep something in. As the centuries passed, the castle did not grow quiet. Instead, new stories began to spread. Things like strange sights, alarming sounds, and, the ever-present figures that could never be explained. People claimed that winged beasts, they still circled the skies above the courtyard because, well, they can fly. And this was pretty much just as the old legends had warned. They were seen swooping through the mist, vanishing before anyone could ever follow. On the ground, the stories would grow darker. Some swore that they saw a headless horse, its body strong and fast, but its neck nothing more than a raw open wound that spilled blood as it ran. Others spoke of a headless man stumbling through the fields, leaving a trail of red behind him before fading into the night. There were reports of chained prisoners too, rows of men in long black robes, their steps heavy with chains clanking. Witnesses said the prisoners carried their own severed body parts in their hands. A pack of ghostly dogs tore at their flesh, ripping pieces away, but the prisoners simply picked the parts back up and kept walking. And inside the castle itself, people spoke of a quieter spirit, a woman in white, tall and graceful, wandering the upper halls. She walked alone, silent and pale, her long dark hair flowing behind her. No one knew who she was or what she wanted, but her presence became one of the castle's most lasting mysteries. But not all the stories were about ghosts. Some were about the living, men who made the castle their actual home. In the 1630s, a ruthless mercenary named Roanoke took control of Houska Castle with his men. They raided nearby villages, stealing goods and dragging terrified people back to the fortress. Rumors spread that Roanoke was no ordinary warlord. He was said to practice dark rituals and alchemy, searching for the secret to eternal life. Ain't we all? The villagers lived in fear, believing that Roanoke had already made himself impossible to kill. At last, 2 hunters were sent to finally stop him. They carried special bullets forged by a blacksmith who knew the ways of the occult. Late at night, the hunters called Roanoke to his window. Candlelight flickered behind him as he appeared. Curious to see who dared disturb his sleep, with one shot, they struck him in the head. But even then, Roanoke did not die right away. His men rushed to him. He called out in desperation, demanding they bring him his black hen, a bird he believed held the power to save him. Before it could be fetched, though, he then bled out on the floor. When word spread of his death, his mercenaries fled, scattering into the forests. For a time, Houska Castle stood silent once more. Its halls were empty, yet the air inside always felt heavy, as if the walls remembered every scream and prayer. And at the very center of it all was the chapel, the place built to seal the pit. The chapel at Houska Castle has always been the heart of its mystery. Its walls were painted with angels, demons, and holy figures meant to hold back the darkness. But in the 1800s, the silence of this sacred space was finally broken. A maintenance worker had been hired to repair part of the chapel. At first, the job seemed quite simple, just patching and cleaning. But soon, a strange sound echoed through the stone walls. It wasn't wind, it wasn't footsteps, it was voices. He leaned closer, listening, and realized they were speaking in a language he had never heard before. The words rose and fell like chanting, deep and strange, as if many people were whispering all at once. One word repeated again and again. Seraph. The man froze. He knew that seraph meant seraph, a celestial being, an angel of fire, but the sound of it inside that empty chapel filled him with dread, not comfort. The voices grew louder, pressing against him, filling the small room. Terrified, the worker dropped his tools and ran, and he never returned to the castle again. And so the chapel, meant to protect, became a place feared even more. Years later, in 1836, the famous Czech poet Karl Heinrich Macha came to Houska. Unlike the worker, Macha wasn't afraid of the legends. He was curious, drawn to the mystery of the castle itself. One night, as he rested within its walls, he had a dream, or perhaps it was something else. He saw himself falling into the pit beneath the chapel, sinking deeper and deeper until the darkness swallowed him. And then, light. He found himself standing in a strange city. The buildings were tall, covered in glass and iron. Loud machines clattered through the streets, and carriages moved without horses. The air was filled with smoke, and people carried strange devices that lit up like tiny lanterns. A young girl approached him, and she told him the year was 2006. Macha stared at the glowing object in her hand. It was small, flat, and shone with symbols. Though he could not name it, later's descriptions actually matched something we recognize today, which is just a cell phone. When he awoke, he was back in Houska Castle, but his words, written later, seemed to describe the Prague of the future, exactly as it would become. Was it only a dream, or had the poet slipped through time, pulled forward by the power of the pit? By the late 1930s, Europe was sinking into war, as we all know. When Nazis force marched into Czechoslovakia, they seized 4 castles, one of them being Houska. But this was no ordinary military outpost. Houska stood far away from battle lines, far, once again, from supply routes. Its purpose was different, and to this day, it is still debated. And it's important to remember, the Nazis at this point were kind of like grasping at straws, anything that they could. So some say the Nazis actually used the castle to hide dangerous writings, shelves filled with books on Judaism, Freemasonry, and forbidden knowledge about the occult. Books meant to be destroyed, but instead hidden in the depths of Houska. Others whispered that Heinrich Himmler, one of Hitler's most feared men, had chosen Houska for something far stranger. Himmler was obsessed with the old ways, neo-pagan rituals, dark ceremonies, and the idea that ancient powers could shape the future. That's why we created the nuke. Anyways, rumors spread of experiments inside the castle walls. Some spoke of a breeding program. Others said Houska became a brothel for his soldiers. But the most chilling stories were about the rituals themselves. Men in black uniforms gathered in the chapel above the pit, performing secret rites. It was said that some officers actually experienced visions, time slipping forward, glimpses of a world yet to come. A few even claimed Hitler himself may have joined, hoping the castle's power could reveal the future, which I'm sure he was pretty bummed out about. Then the war ended. The Nazis fled, and silence fell over the old stone halls once again. But Houska kept one last secret. When investigators searched the castle after liberation, they found a hidden chamber beneath the floorboards. Inside were the bodies of 3 Nazi soldiers. There had been no battle at Houska, no sign of an attack. These men had been executed by their own comrades. Why? Well, no record actually explains it. No survivor ever spoke of it. And so the castle's Nazi chapter closed, not with a battle, but with another mystery to pile on. Even in modern times, Houska Castle has not escaped its dark reputation. People who enter its halls often come back with chilling stories. One of the most famous moments came after 2010, when a team of ghost hunters arrived with cameras, voice recorders, and measuring tools. They wanted proof, not just legend. At first, the castle was quiet, but as night fell, their equipment began to fail as well. Batteries that had been fully charged drained to nothing within minutes. The team replaced them with only new ones to die just as fast. Inside the chapel, they placed a recorder. Soon, odd noises filled the air, knocks, scratches, and low echoing sounds. When the tape was played back, strange voices could be heard. The words were unclear, spoken in a language no one could recognize. Then something worse ended up happening. One of the investigators suddenly cried out in pain. On his arm was a fresh burn, red and blistering, though no flame or heat source was anywhere near him. The team was shaken. Some wanted to leave immediately. Others, though, pressed on, moving into the courtyard. There, several members reported seeing tall, shadowy figures pacing back and forth along the walkway. They moved slowly, as if guarding the castle, then vanished into the darkness. And the castle itself seemed to be alive. Doors that were unlocked refused to open, as though held shut from the other side. Heavy footsteps echoed in empty rooms. A cold wind swept through closed spaces. Not all who visited could stay the night. One guest, who was so overwhelmed by fear that they actually leapt from a second-story window in desperation. He survived, but after that, overnight stays at Houska were limited, and only the brave, or really freaking curious, would even dare try. To this day, ghost hunters still come, hoping to capture proof of what haunts the castle. Many leave with shaky hands and uneasy looks, carrying stories they cannot explain. So for many years, people have told strange stories about this place. Not everyone believes these stories in the same way. Some people try to explain Houska with normal, everyday causes. I mean, there always usually is. The first one is that there's limestone gases, and this is actually causing hallucinations. This theory suggests people are just totally getting lost in the sauce. Under the castle, the ground is full of limestone. Limestone can hide pockets of gas. Sometimes these gases come up through the cracks and fill rooms. If a person breathes that air, they can feel dizzy, sleepy, or sick. They might smell bad things or have strange dreams. A tired person in a dark room might imagine like a shape at the edge of their sight. And this idea helps explain fainting, headaches, the feeling of being watched, people getting sick, the voices, pretty much all that. It does not, however, easily explain long, clear visions of robed figures that many people describe. The next one are really just natural sounds and environmental noises. This suggests it's just supposed to be there. Wind moves through stone, water drips in hidden places, and animals walk in the trees. Old wood creaks as it cools at night, and these ordinary sounds can be mistaken for footsteps or a voice. A cold draft can make a shiver feel like a touch. This idea explains many common haunted house reports, but it cannot explain, though, the rare claims of physical marks, burns, and even well-recorded events that show no animal or wind caused these things to happen. The next one is just basically, it could just be renovations. Houska changed many times. Builders added rooms, moved walls, and sealed doors. What looks strange today may come from repairs long ago. Some stairways now lead to empty space. Some windows face only the courtyard. These changes can make the building feel confusing and wrong. This idea explains missing kitchens and odd layouts. It does not easily explain, though, why the chapel was built right over the pit, or why so many defenses seem to face inward rather than outward. The next one is, when you go fishing and the fish was like 2 inches, and then by the time you tell the story for like the 20th time, the fish was now over a foot. These people argue that simple tales were stretched into horrors throughout centuries of retelling. One neighbor's small memory can be construed to another, and now it becomes a village tale. After many retellings, a strange noise at night can now turn into a ghostly voice in the next telling, and over time the tale grows sharper and darker. This idea shows how a simple event can become a big legend. It also shows why people who kind of come later expect to see something, but still does not fully answer why so many different people across many centuries tell nearly the same kinds of stories about the pit, the winged figures, or a woman in white. The next one, possibly just human expectation and confirmation bias. While some people believe visitors coming to Houska are already expecting ghosts, their minds may shape every creak and shadow into proof. If someone hears that a place is haunted, they will look for signs. Families pass down these stories, and neighbors repeat them. Guests arrive, having already heard these things, and they're just ready to be freaked out, and in this way, the same images and feelings repeat over and over again. This idea explains how legends keep their shape, but it does not fully explain reports from visitors who did not know these stories before they came. So now if you go there, it's too late, you already know it. So ultimately, what could it be? Well, Houska seems to be a place where ordinary things kind of add up and make strong experiences. The most plausible theory suggests that Houska is a place which amplifies in the mind. Strange air or tired bodies can change how people feel. Odd rooms in a deep pit give the mind a shape to focus on. Long stories and warnings make visitors expect something strange. When body, place, and story meet, small signals can grow into strong feelings. A creak can become a voice. A cold spot can feel like a presence. A dream can be seen like a memory. And this stacked idea explains why different people across time describe similar images and why many visitors feel real fear. At the same time, a few reports do not fit this theory well, though. Some people say they felt burns, saw objects move, or watched the same detailed event with others at the same time. These claims are rare, but they kind of are like, well, that's weird. And I mean, they ask, like, it's a better class of evidence if multiple people are seeing something. So some visitors report something also different. A couple described faceless robed figures whispering about harm. An Irish visitor actually said one room showed him scenes from other times, like a hologram of the past or future. A renowned hypnotherapist felt drawn into the chapel and saw herself as a white-robed priestess and then as a sacrifice victim. Her memory faded, and then she was back outside on the hill. She left shaken, convinced that she had stepped into another time. These stories are strong and very personal to the individual. Science really has not accepted them without, you need repeatable recorded proof for it to be real. So it's like, if it just happens to one person, it's like, okay, well, that's anecdotal. But this does not make them false. It just means we need to study them a little more. So, a latest online story actually shows how people have reacted to this in real life. In that account, doors opened on their own, footsteps echoed in empty halls, laundry was dumped, and a child played with an invisible friend in one room. Priests came to bless the house for 3 days, and afterward, the place felt different, warmer, and calmer. This story shows how belief, ritual, and attention can change how a place feels and how people remember events. So what is Houska? The best answer now is that the castle most likely brings together natural causes, odd architecture, and centuries of stories. These combine to create a strong experience in visitors' mind. At the same time, science does not accept ghosts because ghosts cannot be measured or tested in the way that other things can. For that reason, many of these stranger claims remain outside of science. Still, a few rare reports push beyond natural explanations and continue to invite questions. Is Houska only a myth built on stone and fear, or could it be a doorway to something unseen? Something science has not yet really concluded, I guess. The castle itself gives no answers. It waits in silence, leaving each visitor to decide what they actually believe. All right, so obviously, as per usual, I'm breaking in at the end here. Now, kind of one of the things I do want to talk about is just, it's called the game of telephone. I don't know if you were a kid at one point, you probably remember, and it's basically you get like, let's say 20 people together, right? You start one statement on one side, you whisper it to the next person, and then as it goes around, I don't understand why. I always just assumed because it was like somebody wanted to screw with the whole process, because likely somebody does want to screw with the whole process, because they're like, oh, it'll be funny to change it up completely, ha ha ha. But it does change. It's almost impossible to get the first statement to get back around and actually be the same statement, which is why, and I'm going to tell you this is for your own edification in life. When you hear stories about somebody, right, like, I don't know, breakups or divorce or business partnerships failing or just something along those lines, believe about, I don't know, a third of what you hear, because it's very likely details have been added, and that's just kind of how things go. I don't really trust, like, if I don't see something specifically myself and I'm like, can actually like identify what happened in a situation, I will listen to what people say, but I don't inherently just automatically believe it, because people leave out things, especially if it pertains to themselves. They will alter events slightly to make them seem more empathetic, or, you know, make you more sympathetic to their plight. It's a lot of things that change. So these types of stories, especially when it's creepy, right? Like, oh, there's a bottomless pit and people's hair turning white and I saw into the future. What is it? In the 1970s, the concept of a cell phone was already like well established. If I remember correctly, War of the Worlds actually had something like they were just basically communicators, I think they would call them. So the idea of a communicator has been around for quite some time. And one of the things that I've always found interesting about humanity as a whole, a lot of times our science fiction becomes science fact. It's like we're coming up in our head, okay, well, what do we want something to look like? And then we write about it, we talk about it, it's kind of like, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually it's like, well, why can't we do that? Why can't we build it this way? Why can't we have a ship that jumps through time and space? I mean, that's also the other part. I know I'm getting way off topic here, but that's the other part to remember. I think it was a week before the Wright brothers flew. They said basically like 100 scientists could get together and work for 1 million years and we would be no closer to flight. And then boom, a week later we flew. So the point is that you need to be careful about what you believe when it comes to, I know I got way off topic there, but you need to be careful about what you believe. To me, this really looks like there probably is a deep hole that goes into a cave. And caves are creepy sometimes, right? You get winds that blow through them, you get like winged creatures, you might just have giant bats. Like, I get it, and it's just like, if those stories had persisted for long enough, there may have been, you know, somebody's like, you know what, let's build a castle around it and we'll contain it. Because honestly, if they're flying, then what kind of containment is that really? Like, they could just fly out of there. As for everything else, it seems to me like a lot of this is power of suggestion. First off, paranormal investigators, I think they want to find something, obviously, because that's what they're doing. They want there to be evidence, because they're doing the same thing we're all doing, which is we're looking for some sort of afterlife evidence, because nobody wants to clock out and then just, oh, well, it's just darkness. That sucks. Of course, you wouldn't be conscious. But anyways, the whole point is we're all looking for the same thing. Nobody wants to die. Nobody wants it to be the end. So what are we looking for? Well, paranormal investigators are a little bit more hopeful in finding it in this life, I guess is the best way to put it. Personally, I'm part of the God Squad, so I'm like, hey, I don't know if there's anything. I'm just believing that there is, and I'm just going to keep going. But so I think that's kind of the biggest thing with this, is that they are priming themselves. A lot of people are priming themselves to see something that's not really there. And it can be creepy sometimes, right? It's like, I remember I was on a hike on a mountain the other day, and like it was kind of cloudy. I think it was like 6 p.m. or so, and it was starting to get a little darker. And I was just kind of walking by myself, and the trees started creaking. It's beautiful during the day, but when things turn to night, or starting to turn to night, it gets a little creepy out in the woods. And it probably gets a little creepy out in this castle too. So to me, it just kind of seems like this is just a bunch of retellings of stories that have gotten progressively more and more, like the scariest ones persisted. Because, I mean, were they even writing down records in the year 800 when they were lowering prisoners in that? Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's just kind of like, probably not. So all I do know is that I'm planning on going to Europe at some point. And much like how I have to go look at Billy Creek from my last episode when I'm up in Indiana for my cousin's wedding, I don't know. When I go out to Prague, because it's been suggested to me by a woman over there that I know. Basically, she's like, yeah, you gotta go to Prague. Well, if I'm gonna go to Prague, I guess I'm gonna go to Houska Castle or Houska Castle and just go see that. So anyways, let me know what you guys think. Would you want to, I don't know, would you guys want to see a video on that? Like, if I end up going over there? I'm not really sure. This channel, obviously, like, I'm just covering stuff, right? But I think it would be cool to, like, go to these places occasionally and be like, yeah, this is what I saw, this is what I experienced. I could technically do that. I could start doing that at Billy Creek. And then who knows, maybe I'll just go to other places. But either way, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leaving a like would be great of you. And subscribing is a great way to stay up to date when I post. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, all that stuff in the description. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the Literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson West, Monkey Man, Scrungle, and Invictus Echo. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Eyewitness to the Event tier, we have Beaver Malaga and Dragon Master Knight. At the first-hand accounts tier, we have the Soggy Anglerfish. And at the second-hand accounts tier, we have Troy, Fred Rush, Stutz, Bianca, and Pouches. And thank you guys, like the rest of my patrons as well, for all of your awesome support. It really goes a long way towards helping out. But all right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.